Hi everyone, it's Derek Grimmel again, and we're going to continue looking at this really interesting queen versus rook and pawn position that we found in the Anand-Nakamura game. Now, I've modified it a bit. I've moved the queen from h7 to g7 to get a basic template that we can now start moving around the board. In this position, we're 47 moves from mate, and about 20 of those are going to be spent capturing the pawn. So we're actually not 3 moves from the 50 move rule. And you already saw the basic procedure. We're going to go here, we're going to go here, and then the rook is going to go here. And we're in the position where you make a counterintuitive move. Either the king goes to b4 or the queen falls back to b2. And the purpose of the queen falling back to b2 is to be able to move down the b file or over to h8 and do the surrounding maneuver on whichever side the rook isn't, so that the rook can't get in the way and screw things up. Okay. Now, if we move the position 1 file to the left, it's still 48 moves to mate, and the very same procedure applies. King over 1, rook check, king over another, back to rook e5, and then the queen goes to a2 or the king goes to the a file, either way. So if this pawn is on one of the 2 central files, you're about 48 moves for mate, and our procedure works. Let's move it 1 more to the left. Now all of a sudden, we're 59 moves from mate. And the procedure, the same idea that we have been using is what we do, but there are now some differences. We send the queen over here immediately because the rook isn't there. And in this case, it's better for black to bring the rook back immediately and harass that queen on the short side because it doesn't have much space. Okay, so we go here, so the rook comes over here because the pawn is defended by the threat of pinning the queen to the king. Okay, pin the rook, turnabout is fair play. Okay, now we have to defend the pawn, bring the king up. And we don't walk in, we walk over here because the rook cannot harass us. We just bought ourselves a move. Now the rook returns to its 2 safe squares out in front of the pawn, but we've gained a move. And now we're going to do the same strategy from a different square. We go queen a3, and again, we're going to check the king horizontally and do that same pawn endgame surrounding maneuver on whichever side the rook isn't. But it takes a little bit of maneuvering to buy a move to get around the rook before we can safely get our queen to that square. Or the other alternative at this point is, again, send your king 1 more, and we're still going to play the same trick of getting our queen to whichever side the rook is not on to begin the surrounding maneuver and getting black's pieces to start getting in each other's way. Now that's true of bishop pawns. Reflections are the same way. What about the knight pawn? Well, I have to admit this surprised me. It's a dead draw. So for example, queen d8, king b7, queen d7. The king can even go there because there's no check. We can go there. See, the problem is the queen has lost the 2-sided maneuver. The only side to attack from is on the right-hand side because all the squares on the left-hand side are controlled by the king. The queen can't penetrate. Dead draw. Just stay in your corner. Remember this fortress if it looks like your opponent is heading toward a queen versus your rook endgame. If you can get into this position, you got a draw in hand. And then again, I was surprised. If we go 1 more to the left, it's an easy win. So there's several ways to do it, but a simple strategy is we're just going to buy a move. Okay, queen there, go back there. Okay, what are you going to do? The problem for black is that with a rook's pawn, the rook doesn't have 2 safe squares, so it can't just switch to the other one and burn a move and pass the move back to white. Okay, what do you do here? Well, about the most sensible thing to do is harass the queen. Okay, let's give a check there. Let's give a check from there. Safer not to let the rook be pinned. Let's go ahead and bring the king forward. All right, let's go there. Or, yeah, and sacrifice the pawn if you go there. Or, if we decide to try to save the pawn, well, the king can't save it from a7 because the square is controlled. That leaves that. Okay, you can see it. Check there, check there, check there. And if he plays rook b7 to block, king takes on a6 and the rook is gone and it's mate anyway. If the king moves out, now your king comes in here, he's toast, he's mated. Go there to block the mate on the back rank, and you check from here, interpose the rook, take it, mate in the corner. So we're uncovering some basic principles of this endgame. A pawn on the two central files, you're about 47 moves from mate in this fortress. If you have a bishop's pawn, you're about 59 or 60 moves from mate. If it's a knight's pawn, it's a dead draw, and if it's a rook pawn, it's a relatively easy win through Zugzwang. So there's one position left to look at, and that's what if we shove it all the way over here with a bishop pawn but the queen on the short side. Well, we're 56 moves from mate, and it's still the same basic ideas. Let's go ahead and go here. Rook check, go over one more, rook comes back to its other safe square, and we're going to play our same strategy here now, only like we did with that the bishop pawn on the other side, we do it from the A or H file, threatening to go to the left or right down the H file, whichever one works. Okay, king g7, the rook isn't on that side, so check from over here, and we're going to try to surround the pawn. King f8, attack the pawn, king there, give the check. You've seen this before. Come here, go to your other safe square, check from there, and the king goes up there. Okay, we've seen this all before. Your move, try to figure out how to save both the rook and the pawn. I did decide from right about here as we're doing this surrounding maneuver, let's look at something we haven't looked at. What if he goes over here? Well, attack the pawn. It's not that different. Check there. Okay, we've seen this all before. About the only difference is that it's not a big difference. From here, it's slightly more efficient to go ahead and go here rather than go queen f7, but either one works. You're only 2 moves slower by following the template and going queen f7, but we are playing for a Zugzwang of some kind, and queen g8 cutting the king off from the whole g file is just a little bit quicker. So a plausible line of play, rook check. Okay, well, he's just given up a cutoff. Go here, take the check. Whoops, no more checks. So at this point, the defender's best option is to play for a cutoff on the e file. It doesn't matter whether it's e3, e2, or e1. They're the same distance from mate. And we're going to bring the queen down here and play from both sides again. Okay, let's give a check there. Okay, once again, the checks have run out. Go to a safe square. Zugzwang, your move. Okay, we'll play there. Now I'm going to check there. What do you do to save everything? Okay, let's interpose. Check from there. Wasn't hard to find. And now it's getting really hard to save everything. King g6. I actually didn't look at that. I looked at king g4. Check from there. Bring the king over. Touch the pawn. King e5. Queen e2 check. And if you interpose the rook, the king has to let go of the pawn, and we're back to king and rook, queen versus rook endgame. Let's see if we're back here. I didn't actually look at king g6, so let's go ahead and put it in. Once again, touch the pawn. Okay, we can play king g7 here. And we can give the check from there. And king h6, attack a hanging rook. And there's really no safe way now for black to continue holding on to that pawn with the rook, because the check from here controls that square. He has to send the rook away, and you take the pawn. Now if we rotate the position so that the black king is on the H file. Notice that the pawn only moves one direction, so the rook no longer has two guaranteed safe squares guarded by that pawn. What difference does it make? Well, in this position, we're about 43 moves from mate. So not much has changed in the same kinds of procedures. We start by attacking the pawn, check there, king plays to f5, and we pass with the king, and we use very much the same procedures that we've seen before. If we back up, if we move up the board 46 moves from mate, and you've seen this, going to the safe square, give that check, give that check. Now the king is kind of pegged in. The rook and the pawn and the king are getting in each other's way. So the best thing to do for the defender here is play for a cutoff on the E file, which is hard to maintain with the pawn. We have to give that check there at some point. Okay, hang on to the pawn, queen g2 check, king there, and now there has to be this imposition, otherwise something's going to go lost. And we check from there. King g5, keeping guard on the pawn. Come over and tap the pawn, king there, and now the pawn is going to be lost. The king has to let go of it. All right, and I messed up the sequence. If we go down one more, this again is 61 moves to mate. And again, there's nothing surprising here. Standard template kinds of moves. Pass the move back to the defender. And now he does okay by trying to maintain a third rank thing here. Okay. Guard the checking square on A1 there. Come back, queen H4. Now going rook A3 doesn't work because queen H3 check skewers the rook. Okay, so king up there. Cut the king off from walking up to the 5th rank. Okay, take your other safe square with your rook, basically pass a move. Let's start walking the king over here. And get the king completely out of the way, and now the queen can play from that side. And if he tries to cover up, well, we're doing something similar here. Now that my king can go there, as in the queen versus rook ending, if you can walk into a discovered check, you're usually just as well off doing so. Okay, so if he finally decides, I'm going to advance the pawn, it's reasonable to do here, tap the pawn, and if he tries to save the pawn, he can't save it any longer. He has to let go of the pawn, and on your next move you're going to capture it. And if we go down here, just like with a knight pawn, this is a draw because the attacker just plain doesn't have enough room here. The defending king can just shuttle around between f2, g3, and there's just no way to kick him out. The rook covers checking squares, and you cannot evict the king from the corner. And finally, if we go down one more file, again, it's a dead draw, except that then white can make a mistake and actually lose the game if he allows the pawn to queen. Now, what if we pull the original position off the edge of the board so the pawn's now on its relative 4th rank instead of its 3rd rank? Well, as with the bishop pawn, the center pawns, everything is the same. Bishop pawns are about 59 moves from mate. Center pawns are about 46 moves from mate. This is the knight pawn, and once again, it's a dead draw for the very same reasons. And a rook pawn is a quick loss by similar procedures to what we've seen before. And now when the king touches the pawn, The king can't defend it, so the rook would have to defend it. But then it's very easy to get him into deep trouble this way. Okay, so he's going to have to move the king to b7, and then king to b5 is going to win the house. Okay, so let's go back to Anand-Nakamura, this endgame that produced this very interesting position, and let's go ahead and finish it up. So Nakamura played there, and this is where Anand made the oops by going there and giving away a critical tempo. And after this check, king e8 gives us our interesting position. Nakamura played king f6, which is 5 moves quicker to mate. It's not that big a deal. He sure could have played worse moves. Okay, so we go there. Nothing here is really terribly bad. These two guys are doing pretty good in a position that I bet none of them explored before in their training. Well, they're super grandmasters. They might very well have looked at this position before. That's a reasonable place to play. We're getting ready to play our surround and capture game from the left-hand side. And as you might guess, the right defense here is rook d5, so that the queen can't attack from that side without the rook getting in the way. That is a concession, because now we're going to do the surroundy thing from there. In our system, you would typically play rook d5 here. It doesn't really matter, though. And we're going to walk over to the other side. That was all optimal play. And at this point, that king e5 is about as good as it gets. And the best move to play here, of course, is queen e7. Touch the pawn, pass the move to black. But that's not too bad either. That's pretty close to optimal. Okay, king f5, queen g7. And now we're going to see why you don't play for a cutoff on the d file, because that's what Nakamura does. Rook d1, and all of a sudden, queen f7 check, and the pawn is lost, because the only place for the king to go to hold the pawn is to king e5, and then you immediately lose the rook to a fork. So from here, Nakamura has no choice but to give up the pawn, taken with check. And now what I see is that Nakamura does what you've heard me complain about in other videos. He's running into the corner. Maybe he's trying to set up a second-rank fortress, which he could achieve with king g1. He's really not correctly set up for the boomerang position, but he did give up a lot of moves there. It's far better to fight to try to stay in the center of the board or on a central file or set of ranks, and only move into the corner when your opponent forces you to. Now right here, of course, the correct thing to do is when you can form a rosette, you should. You're in the corner, you're still very close to loss. But this is just a quick Philidor position, and that's pretty much the end of the game. So thanks for watching, and see what explorations you come up with in this interesting ending.